talkSPORT's Women's Football Show on talkSPORT 2. I'm Lianne Sanderson. So we chatted about the Lionesses and Wales, but who else do we need to watch out for this summer at the Euros? Uma, you are back. Of course you're back because we have to get the scope, the inside information. How are you? I can't believe the Euros is finally around the corner.
Oh my God, honestly, it's finally here. It's so exciting. I'm so excited to be out in Switzerland, honestly. I'm excited to see the country and the football. But yeah, it's gonna
Make sure
be.
you eat lots of chocolate as well because Switzerland has the best chocolate and they give it to you on the air, like when you're about to fly as well, which is the best thing ever.
Oh God, I'm gonna come back from this so unhealthy, Leanne. I definitely will. But let's chat about the other countries at this tournament because obviously I know you touched on the Lionesses and Wales, but I had a look at the odds to win the tournament, and it kind of goes Spain, England, France, Germany, Sweden, and then the Netherlands. The first thing that strikes me about that, it's crazy that three of those are in the same group. Unfortunately, it's England's group. Well, actually, we should say, unfortunately, it's Wales's group. They're going to have a really tough time. But let's break down each of those favourites one by one. We have to start with Spain, of course. We've seen them play the Lionesses not too long ago in the Nations League. They won one, they lost one. But why are they such a danger as a team, do you think? I mean, you look at some of the players in there that are commonly talked about. You've got Aitana Bonmati, Alexia Putellas. We saw Claudia Pina. I think she announced herself on the stage, didn't she, in that last Nations League game? But what is it that makes Spain so good for you?
I think it's the way they possess the ball and, the way that Barcelona have historically dominated world football for 5 years or so now. And obviously they lost the final, the Champions League final. But I said when England were playing them a week later, I said this is the worst time to play against them because they are coming for blood. You know, when like a shark's in the water and it can smell the blood, it was almost like these Spanish players, like what they did against Manchester City, what Barcelona did, after losing to them. I think for this Spain team, they have a lot of strength in depth. I think the weaknesses that I see in this team, if there are any, I think Paralluelo hasn't had her best season. She was my breakout player last year in the Champions League. I think she's a top player, real athlete, got a great football brain. But I think this year, I think it's been quite underwhelming. We saw in the game against England, then Claudio Pina came in, scored those goals, and I have a feeling that they do that at Barcelona, don't they? They kind of play player for player. They're completely different players, but if one plays, the other one doesn't. So I think if there's any positions that I think they are lacking, maybe in just based upon form. But having said that, Paralluelo could go into this tournament and, do what she did last year in the Champions League. I think obviously Bonmati, Putellas seemed back to her normal self after that ACL injury. And I think they had played an incredible game against the Lionesses.
Yeah, it's so true about Paralluelos because I remember just being so mesmerised by her at the last World Cup. She was absolutely incredible. But you're right, I feel like it's well she hasn't been starting for Barcelona. The other area I thought as well was defensively. I mean, WSL audiences will be familiar with Alexandria, of course, who we think is leaving Man City, right? But I think she's had a good season, but she has had moments where I think she's been weak, and also Irene Paredes as well. I think has had a few moments where perhaps they haven't been at their best. So, and we know that England have been able to get past them. Whether other teams are able to do that, we'll see, right? But yeah, I feel like that's us kind of really picking for needles in a haystack, isn't it? Looking for Spain weaknesses.
But I think you have to put them under pressure. I think the goalkeeper, Katakoya, I don't think she gets put under enough pressure. I think she's a good goalkeeper, but I don't think she's a great goalkeeper. And that sounds crazy because I think people put her up there, but I just don't think, at times she's really challenged. So I do agree with you. I think Alexandria, when she played for City this year, playing out from the back, they were turning over the ball. So that for me would be a weakness, but I think we're also reaching because they are that good.
We have to, otherwise, otherwise
Uh,
it's hard to see past anyone else winning this, right? But we'll see what happens and how Spain get on. Let's talk about another familiar foe for England, at least in the form of Germany. Obviously, I think England fans will remember not too long ago a bit of a horrible night at Wembley when we were beaten 4-3 by the Germans. They scored three inside about half an hour. It was crazy night. And then, of course, on the flip side of that, you've got another great night at Wembley where they beat them in the final in 2022. So we've got a long history with Germany. What's their kind of threat level at the moment? Because if you look at most recently in the Nations League, they had a great performance against the Netherlands, one of the other favourites. They beat them 4-0 though. And for me, Germany are actually kind of flying under the radar here as one of the favourites.
Yeah, I think when you look at their group as well, they've got Sweden, Denmark, and Poland. I mean, no doubt they'll get out the group. Everybody always tips Sweden to be kind of in and amongst it. And I don't think they've really been up there for a number of years now. They've got good players, but I don't think they're a threat. I think you look at this German team at that game at Wembley specifically. Gvin was unbelievable in that game, brilliant, like scoring, outside fullback, like brilliant player. I think obviously the goalkeeping has always been an area of their strength as well. I think Anne-Catherine Berger's done fantastically well last year when she was at Gotham. Hasn't had the greatest of season start to the season with them this year. They haven't had a great start, but I think this German team, you can never write them off because every time historically I've ever played against them, we always struggle to beat them. I think the Lioness has overcome that. Obviously at the final, you have to have a little bit of luck sometimes in the final when their best player ends up getting injured in the warm-up. Don't think I've ever seen anything like that. She was in the starting 11 picture and then isn't there anymore. So, yeah, you have to have a little bit of luck. But I think this German team, Fili Rao as well, has had a really good season over in America. So I don't think you can ever write them off. Anyone would be silly to do that. And historically, one of the best things about the German team that I think separates them, they are so great at delivering balls on the run. And they are so great at countering, but with strength, dynamic in different ways. It'll be interesting to see who starts for them as well at the Euros. Will it be the Brits? Those types of players. You have to wait and see. And Oberdorf as well is still out from my understanding. So maybe potentially she could be back.
Not sure she'll be fit. And of course, Alex Pop has retired, so they won't have her there. You mentioned Fili Rao, actually. I wanted to ask you about that because there's been a little bit of discontent perhaps in the Germany team. On socials, I noticed that Fili Rauch posted something. She wrote, and this was when she wasn't called up to one of their Nations League squad, I believe, not the final squad. She said she was very disappointed. It's always a great honest play for Germany. Not inviting me is one thing, not informing me and not even giving me a reason. I just don't understand. Here, I wish for much more transparent communication. Lianne, I don't know if you've got any insider knowledge on this, any thoughts. What's kind of going on here, do you think?
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because we had Fili on the show last season as well. And I love how she's quite open and honest. And I welcome that type of stuff. As we remember at the Olympics, she wasn't even announced in the squad originally and then goes to the Olympics and plays. I think she started every single game. So it's crazy how football. So from the outside, from what I'm seeing, I don't necessarily know this for a fact because I haven't spoken to Fili yet, but I will speak to her at some point. And I think as a manager and a player, it doesn't seem like they're having her because if you're not picking someone for an Olympics and you pick them and then they start, how does that even make sense? Because usually if a player comes in, unless there's loads of injuries, but it's difficult because I like Fili and I think she's a top player and I think she is, for that position, I think she is the best that they have. For the courage this year, she's playing a little bit higher as well. She's not playing in defensive positions. So I do think she's a great addition to this team. But I think when you're coming out and you're also talking about a team that you're still playing on, it's a difficult one, isn't it?
It's tough. It's tough. And speaking about emissions and shock drama, shall we say, we have to talk about France. This really did surprise me. They've had not one, but three shocks in their squad selection. Their coach, Laurent Bonadai, he dropped not only their captain, Wendy Renard, their vice-captain, Eugenie Le Sommer, and then, of course, Kenza Dali, who, if you are at all familiar with Aston Villa, you'll remember she was a midfielder there not too long ago. Now, his explanation for this, he spoke about how he's trying to rebuild this team. They've perhaps not had the best run or a run befitting the quality of that side in the last few tournaments. And he said, I thought this was really interesting, he said, as Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I want different results for this team, so I've gone with a different selection. Now, in theory, you understand that idea because, yes, if you're doing the same thing every single time and it's not working, you have to switch something up. But this feels huge. This feels like the equivalent of dropping Leah Williamson or something. Wendy Renard is an insane player, and I know she struggled with injury recently, but for France, dropping a player like that, well, dropping three players like that right before a huge tournament, when they know they're going to have to face the Netherlands and the Lionesses in the groups, I mean, it really shocked me.
Yeah, it's a big shock. And it's funny because coincidentally, I spoke to Kenza on Friday and she had a lot to say on this subject about not being selected because she only found out on the Thursday she wasn't selected. And from my understanding of what she was telling me, he put it down to age. He spoke up to Kenza, she's 33 years old. And for those people that haven't been watching Kenza Dali this year, she looks like a spring chicken. She's covering the most distance. We have some stats, and I'm not a big stat person, but her stats in the last game she played in, she ran 11.7 kilometers, which was more than any player had ran at the last Women's World Cup. And that's why she came with those stats to me, because she was like, well, the manager's saying, in other words, I'm old. And they kind of told her that in Aston Villa as well. And she's having an incredible season. So, she's not happy about it, to say the least. But Wendy Renard, Le Sommer, I kind of understand to a certain degree, because I think in the last 2 or 3 seasons, it just looks like it's done, really. Let's be honest. But taking nothing away from the quality she has proven over the years, Wendy Renard, there's been a lot of problems at France, hasn't there, over the years, whether it be Diancra, when her Renard went in there as well. Like, there just seems to always be like something happening off the pitch for France where they can't just focus on the pitch. So massive calls for me. Wendy Renard not being selected and Kenza, I think for me that was a shock. Kenza had been out of the team for a long time, but then brought back in this year. And she honestly, if anyone has a chance to watch her play in America, and I'm not saying this because I work over there, like genuinely, she's playing her best football I've ever seen her play, and she's playing in the defensive midfield role as well.
It's a huge call as well, I think, to remove your leadership structure, and they're going to have to pick a new captain, and we'll see who that is. But I also thought this was such an interesting call when you contrast it to what Serena Wiegmann's done with Lauren James, because if this is to do with injury, it's so interesting that obviously their coach Bonadai has gone, she struggled with injury and I'm going to remove her despite the fact that she's still in quite good form. I'm talking about Wendy Renard here, whereas Serena Wiegmann's gone, I haven't seen Lauren James play for 2-3 months, but I'm still going to take a punt on her because I know she's that kind of player. And we'll see whether either of those strategies actually ends up paying off, but intriguing, and we will follow the French team story closely. But let's move on to chat about Sweden now. A lot of familiar names here for WSL fans: Stina Blackstenius, Johanna Rytting-Kaneryd, Natalie Bjorn, Amanda Nielden, to name a few. I mean, you mentioned it a few moments ago. Sweden are absolutely stacked, and I feel like they always are. I love the way they play, but they're that team who are so good at getting to the semi-finals, even maybe the final on occasion, but they're no more than that. Do you think they're due a big win, or are they just not quite up to it?
You can never underestimate them. But as we saw in the last Euros, I think England had a fantastic performance against them. And like, I think that was the game when everybody started to believe we could actually win the Euros. And obviously the Spain game as well. But I think this Swedish team, like when I played against them over the years, they've always been good. They've always had good individuals. But I don't know what it is. It's like a psychological thing, like the mentality. If they could have the mentality of like the US Women's National Team, I think they'd probably be like winning things. Do you know what I mean? Like they kind of don't have that psychological edge. Like I don't fear playing against Sweden. Like they have individual players that I fear. That I'd be like, do you know what? They're good players, but they don't have that fear factor that I'm like, oh, like when you look at this group, Germany, Poland, Sweden, Denmark, you're like, will they get out the group? They should get out the group, realistically, but will they? Do you know what I mean? I think when they come up against a team like Germany, I have a feeling that that could be a difficult game for them because, as you mentioned, they've got a lot of players, within that team that are really good. Magdalena Eriksson as well, but they just don't seem to have that next part. Do you know what I mean? I think teams just don't fear playing against them. But I like watching them play. I think Scandinavian teams, have always have the similar template. But I think, I don't know. I think they're quite underwhelming at times.
Yeah, 100%. Wouldn't put it past Denmark to spring a shock as well. We've seen them pull off a few good results over the last few years. So that's always possible. And now let's talk about the last of the favourites, if you will, the Netherlands. The big question here is, will Vivianne Miedema be fit for this tournament? I mean, that 4-0 loss to Germany was horrible for them. They also didn't have Lineth Berenstein, who's another great source of goals for them. And I think even though they've got Daphne van Domselaar back in goal, that's huge for them, really important. I just look at them in that group of death, and I actually think, even though I'm worried for England not getting out of there, I'd be more worried if I was a Dutch fan, because that team without Miedema as well looks really, really shaky.
Yeah, they do. And I saw Viv Miedema after the game in Lisbon. And like I was just talking to her about, her injury, and she was like the focus obviously to be fit for the Euros. I mean, will she be fit? I'm not quite sure. Will it be a different team if she is fit? Yes, but a fit, like we saw Miedema this year, there was glimpses, wasn't there, that she seemed back to herself. And then obviously she picked up another injury. But I think, for me, Viv Miedema is one of the best players in the world on her day. And I don't think she gets really given enough credit because obviously for the last 2.5 years or so, she has been out with injury, more or less. So it's been a long injury, but I think it can be so different. I think Van der Donk being available as well and fit is massive. But I think this Netherlands team, similar to France, like there's a lot of question marks about how they're going to come into this tournament. Like what run of form are they in? What players do they have that can really stand up and be counted? I'd still fear playing against them though. When I look at our group, like England's group, I think like people don't really fear the Netherlands anymore. I think since Serena Wiegmann left there, it's almost like there's been a lot of stuff happening, players coming in, players coming out. Which star players do they really have on their team? Do you know what I mean? Like, not really that many, but I still think with the Netherlands, you can never write them off. I still think I'm really looking forward to the first opening games because I think we'll then see the type of like teams that have come and they're peaking. And we'll see the teams that have come in and, we'll obviously dissect the tournament in a couple of months' time. But then we'll see if the decisions that coaches have made have come back to bite them or if decisions that are made, like bringing Lauren James, is a positive. It's all hypothetical right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting as well. We mentioned the Netherlands when they won under Serena Wiegmann, of course, but when you look at the trajectory they've taken since winning, it's been so hard, I think, for them to sustain that level of success. But also, I think for England, we've seen that same trajectory, right? Under the same manager, Serena Wiegmann, they've had that consistency, but they've still struggled to replicate some of their performances. And actually, when you look at women's football as a whole in these major tournament wins, the only team that really come to mind when you think about a sustained period of success is the USA. I know Spain are kind of doing it at the moment. If they continue that, then that'll be a great model for success as well. But it seems like it's really, really hard, particularly in European football, to kind of get to the top and stay there. And I suppose that's a good reflection on where women's football in Europe is at. I have one final question for you, Lianne. So we've discussed the bookies' favourites, but I'm going to get a prediction from you on your surprise package team. So who is the low-ranked team, perhaps, that we haven't discussed from those ones that you think is going to go further than anyone expects in this?
Well, I think coming from maybe a biased perspective, I'm going to have to go for Italy because my time in Italy, like, I know how hard and intense the training environments are. They're coming off that really good win against Wales as well, which I think Italy lost their way in the last couple of years. But you look at their group, like, I think they can beat Belgium. I think they can beat Portugal. They have to come up against Spain. But I think Portugal, before they just got beat by the Lionesses, we would say they've probably progressed. England drew with them, just before Christmas. But I think when I look at these teams like Italy, I think that could be a team. We saw them being a dark horse in the last Euros and in the World Cup as well. So that would be my surprise package. Someone like Switzerland being the host nation, like you're always going to hopefully feel that love at being at home like the Lionesses did. So I wouldn't say they'd be my surprise package, but I think host nations always do better. Look at Australia, when they were in Australia and New Zealand for the World Cup. Like, I feel like you just have that little bit of extra, like, oomph when you're playing at home. So I think Italy will be my surprise package, but hopefully Switzerland can put on a good show as well.
I think that group A with Switzerland in, that's Norway, Iceland, and Finland, the others in that group. So that's a really interesting group because you haven't really got any of the big hitters in there. Someone like Switzerland. Norway, I mean, we know they won the World Cup, I believe, back in the day, and obviously
Mm.
not quite reached those heights again, but great opportunity for them. I also think you mentioned Belgium. I think Belgium is such a wild card because some of the results they've managed to pull out of the bag. Saw against England, of course, but that group as well, I wouldn't put it past them to beat the likes of Portugal, of course, but then even, coming up against someone like Germany or Italy, who knows what will happen. But we will see, Lianne. All will
Yeah, I
be
mean,
revealed soon enough.
it will, and I'm just so excited. I can't believe it's finally here. We're less than a week away. I'm looking forward to covering this tournament with you. It's going to be brilliant. If it's anything like the last, we're in for a great ride. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lianne.